In his mid-twenties, Kevin Palmieri says he had it all: a beautiful girlfriend, a high-paying job, a sports car, a dream body, but still, he ended up sitting on the edge of a bed debating suicide. After hitting rock bottom, Kevin went all in on self-improvement, determined to overcome his anxiety and depression. Years later, he's host to a successful podcast with hundreds of thousands of downloads in over 100 countries. Kevin, a key to the change in your life was obviously focused on not only learning what you didn't know, but also unlearning old habits. Take us back to that moment that changed it all.
Hmm. It was a very interesting time, and thank you so much for having me, Reno. I appreciate it. It was a very interesting time in my life where I was doing a lot of traveling for work. And I had spent the year I made the most money, I spent 10 years, sorry, excuse me, 10 months out of the year on the road. And it was such a grind and it was so difficult. But since I wanted to make money, it was in alignment with my goal. And that next year, I just didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to travel. I wanted to be home. I just missed having a quote unquote normal life. I didn't feel like I had a normal life. I longed for normalcy. And I woke up one morning, Reno, and I was in a hotel 7 hours from my home working like I had been doing. And my alarm went off at 5:15 in the morning. I sat up and I slid to the edge of this hotel bed. And this hotel was not a nice hotel. We were not staying at the Ritz-Carlton by any stretch of the imagination. And the best way to explain it is there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time, and every single one was on a different station. And one was saying, "You're stuck here forever. I know you want to leave this job, but you're stuck. You can't. If you do leave, what will your friends think? All of your friends look up to you because you make money. What are they going to think? If you do leave, what will your family think? Your family is very proud of you and they look up to you because you make a lot of money." And at the time, I had a podcast and I asked myself, do you really believe you can become a successful podcaster? And the answer, truthfully, was no. And in that moment, I felt so hopeless. I felt so helpless. I felt so trapped, so directionless that I felt like if I ended my life, I would take my problems with me. And that was a very, very challenging, dark place to be. And I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do. Unfortunately, that wasn't the first time I had felt that way. I had felt that way in the past, but I did the only thing I knew or I felt was right. I reached out to somebody who I trusted and I shared with that person what I was going through. And they said, you've had a lot of changes over the last couple of years of your life, but your environment, it's kind of stayed the same. I think you need to change your environment. And then 3 or 4 months later, I ended up leaving that job and then going full time into podcasting. And that's a whole nother story, being broke for the next 3 years. But I was doing something I loved for the first time in my life. And I was doing something that I felt was important in contributing to the world in a different way. So that was the moment. That's the moment that changed me forever. At the time, I was not grateful for it, but I definitely am now because that started everything that's happening today.
Yeah, it seems that this was a real moment of surrender because so many people are stuck in an old self-identity and have this
Mm,
fear of what might come ahead and then stay in that niche, that groove, just unable to move.
yeah. Yeah. I think for the first time, Reno, not only did I have the necessity to make a change, because when you're that low, there's only two options. You either leave the earth or you try to make a change. So my necessity was the highest it's ever been. But what happened was when I reached out to my friend who I trusted, he gave me permission to try something new. He said, "Well, why don't you go try something new?" When if I reached out to somebody who had a fixed mindset, somebody who had the same limiting beliefs I had, they might have said, "Well, you need a job. I mean, you can't just leave your job. That's not realistic." So I think I had enough necessity for the first time in my life. And I really had the permission of somebody who I believed in that really gave me that extra push, that extra motivation, and that encouragement that I needed. So I think it was twofold, really.
Also, a moment of great vulnerability, because admitting that one has that pain is not easy, even to a good
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah. Yeah. My friend was much of a mentor to me. So it was a very interesting relationship where I trusted his knowledge, I trusted his advice, and I trusted his wisdom. And we had had vulnerable conversations before, so I felt safe enough. It definitely was scary, but it wasn't a 10 out of 10 scary. It was like a 4 out of 10. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to tell anybody, it's going to be him. Do I think he has the answers? No, but I do feel like me unloading some of the weight off of my shoulders will be beneficial. But yeah, I think that's the hardest part for people is really talking about how you're feeling. I really believe that the level of your relationships is the level of vulnerability within them. I really do believe that now more than ever.
Absolutely. And how often do we ask people, "How are you?" And you reply, "Well, I'm okay, but
Yeah.
you're everything but okay." And
Yeah.
if you say, "Well, I'm not doing fine at the moment, I'm really feeling terrible," people react very differently, and you go
Yeah.
deeper in an entirely different conversation.
Yeah. I don't know if I mean, I think some people are afraid of being a burden, and I'm putting that in quotes, like a burden. Uh, but I do, to your point, I think a lot of us have surface level relationships. You and I are obviously comfortable talking about the depths of human experience and awareness, but we live in an echo chamber of self improvement. So, us talking about this is just a normal Thursday, right? Where somebody else, if they haven't reflected on their own life, then that's uncomfortable. And if they've never really had deeper conversations with the people around them, it's very hard to go from surface level to, hey, I'm feeling a certain way if you've never done it before.
Absolutely. But how do you motivate people to move into a different space? What is the first step you would recommend people to take if they have gone through that rock bottom moment
Mm,
and take that first step? Of course, accepting vulnerability is one of them,
mm.
but it's the start, obviously, of a very long process
Yeah.
when you're moving from that very rock bottom moment.
Yeah. I think that self-awareness is one of the most important things in the human condition. So I think that you have to, what I think a lot of people do, and myself included, is I looked into the future. One of the best things I've ever done, Reno, is I looked into my past. The reason you are who you are today, a lot of it comes from your past. It's your limiting beliefs, it's your conditioning, it's your traumas, it's those things. And when you're at rock bottom, I think you have to help yourself figure out why you're there. I became very, very, very aware of the fact that I found quote unquote success, realized that wasn't actually success, and I got too much awareness too fast. That's why it was rock bottom for me. I was too aware too soon of, oh my God, I just wasted an entire year of my life. What am I going to do? But that also helped me because it brought me clarity to say, okay, well, my next step should be toward blank. So I believe reflecting into the past creates self awareness that helps us set our goals for our future from a higher clarity standpoint. So I think that is the first thing, is to ask yourself hard questions. Why do I feel this way? Okay. Um, what can I do with this? How did I get to this point? And then you'll start having answers that will raise your awareness, and awareness creates opportunity and behavior. And then that creates feedback, and it becomes a new cycle, a higher vibe cycle, really.
A lot of people are stuck in this negative self-talk that defines identity,
Mm,
and part of the old habit of maybe defining success with external acquisitions and feeling very unhappy about it. Once those external acquisitions have been acquired, this feeling that there is something missing, there's something that is really missing in my life, and it's not all about the external. It's something
mm,
much bigger than that. And you just mentioned earlier on what took you up to a new level was this this service mindset, service in service of something bigger.
Yeah, one of oftentimes people say, Kev, what is your suggestion, or what advice do you have when it comes to somebody finding their purpose or their passion or their mission? And it's such a challenging question because I don't know if there is really one answer. But one thing I usually say is, number one, you've probably already lived it in some way, shape, or form. It's probably just buried somewhere. It's probably in your past more than you realize. That's number one. But there are some questions that you can ask. And one of my favorite questions to ask is kind of a spin-off of other questions I've heard. But you'll hear the question, if you won $1 million tomorrow, what would you, and you didn't have to work, what would you do? I think the problem with that is a lot of us, myself included, I immediately went to pleasure. Well, I'd be sipping a pina colada on the beach. I don't have to do anything. So I rephrase the question to myself, and I do this with clients. If I put $50 million in your bank account tomorrow, and you had to do an activity in the service of the world, what would it be? Because it helps people unlock, well, I'm not going to go to the beach and sit on the beach, but maybe I'm going to go to the beach and pick up trash because I am so sad when I go to the beach and see how much we polluted this earth. That's a heart-driven contribution state. Or I grew up without money. I really wish I could help the youth learn more about financial freedom. Awesome. I think that's where our actual purpose comes from. Oftentimes, Reno, I think we have our purpose. We just don't have the vehicle. Those are two different things. Me bringing self-improvement to the world is a purpose. Me doing it through a podcast and interviewing and chatting, that's a vehicle. So I think there's questions to ask. And that's one that has helped me. And that's definitely helped a lot of people I've worked with, because it breaks the paradigm a little bit. It's not,
Absolutely.
You don't have to do anything, right?
Yeah.
What would you do in the service of others?
Absolutely. Very, very important question. And I find also that the notion of having one purpose in life is very misleading, because in life, often one purpose leads into another. And maybe looking at your life, that wasn't for nothing what you experienced, because that experience gave you those important tools for what you're doing now.
100%. 100%. And it gave me, it's very hard to empathize with something you haven't experienced, right? Like I can say, I try to do a really flexible job of this when I'm communicating. If I said to somebody who just had a child, I haven't slept in 4 days, I have a newborn. If I say, yeah, I completely understand, I don't. I can only understand to the level I can understand. And I think that's a very important distinction, because I can understand what it's like to be sitting at the edge of a bed suicidal. I can't understand what it's like to be sitting at the edge of a bed suicidal with a family at home and a mortgage payment and 2 kids and a dog. My circumstances were very different. So I think circumstances, yeah, to your point, it's very important to understand yours and how you can give back to the world with them.
Absolutely. So you've obviously spoken to a lot of highly successful people. What would you say are the most important habits of successful people?
Great question. I would say the number one is probably consistency. We had somebody on our podcast a while ago, and he was our mentor for a while. His name's Evan Carmichael. He's very big on YouTube. But Evan Carmichael has this graph where he shows how many subscribers he had on YouTube year over year over year. And it was like 30 the first year, and then it was like 100 and maybe 300. And it took many years before he had any subscribers. And now I think he has 3 million. But it was the consistency of doing it every single day. So I think that as humans, we only see where people are. More often than not, we don't see where they started, and we only see where we are, not where we're capable of going with enough consistency. So I think consistency is probably the most important thing on the planet, because without it, very little is actually possible. And then self-awareness. You have to be very, very honest with yourself about what you're good at and what you're not good at. And anybody out there who's listening who struggles with self-worth and self-belief, if I said to you, hey, you're really good at blank, and you really are good at it, it hurts your self-worth if you don't admit that to yourself. And then on the other end, you have to have enough self-worth and self-belief when somebody says, hey, can I give you a little bit of constructive feedback? I really like the way you do this, but I think you could do a little bit better this way. That self-awareness is such a superpower, whether it's a leadership role or no matter where you are in life. It really is important. And then just to pair with that, Reno, I think that the questions that you ask yourself, the most successful people ask themselves questions that bring things up for them. It helps them raise their awareness, but it also helps them re-identify with their identity and then ultimately change their behaviors.
Yeah, there's an old Greek saying, know thyself and know who you are not. Now, our society seems to indoctrinate us into a certain image of what we're supposed to be, and then we lose connection to our true self.
Yeah.
And that point you just mentioned, awareness, is so important, isn't it?
It is. It is. I think we lose parts of our imagination. I think that's an important thing, is when somebody tells you, hey, think realistically. It's like, I understand, right? I'm not going to play in the NBA. I'm 5'4" and I can't shoot a basketball to save my life. That's probably not going to happen. But it's very important that the advice you get, you look at the results that the people have. A lot of people are giving you advice based on their own fears, their own limiting beliefs, their own bottlenecks, not yours. That's where a lot of people get lost, is we take advice from people who just don't want to see us get hurt. It's not that they want to see us fail. They're just afraid we're going to get hurt. And I've given advice in the past when I was scarce, when I didn't believe in myself. I completely understand. I empathize because I understand. But luckily, the person who I gave this advice to didn't listen to me, and they went and did their thing. And I'm very grateful. So yeah, you have to be very careful, because there's a lot of people who are going to tell you to be a certain way, but they're afraid of you failing as the other version of yourself. And sometimes that's understandable. And I try to have empathy for that.
I think also very importantly on who you associate yourself with. If you have people around you who are very negatively minded and keep you in that low vibrational state, you won't be moving ahead. If you choose people who motivate you, who see your true essence, you will be really moving much faster ahead.
Yeah. One of my favorite questions, Reno, I love questions. Questions help. I'm a fan. Are the people in your life the best from your past or the best for your future? That is a wonder. It's challenging. It's powerful. It can be painful. But a lot of our relationships are in our lives because they've always been. We used to go to high school. We used to go to college. And that's okay. I understand. But how many of your relationships are based on the future, not the past? And to your point, the community aspect is such a valuable, underutilized piece of this whole thing.
And often that wrong advice comes from loved, close family members.
Yes.
Who mean good. They have good intentions, but it's often the wrong advice, because it comes from a level, as you said, of their own anxieties and fears.
Yeah. And I think one of the interesting parts of the podcast for me is realizing that everybody knows a lot, but nobody knows everything. Nobody knows everything. So it's almost like I assumed that all of my teachers knew way more than me. They did in some things, not everything necessarily. I assumed doctors that I met knew everything. No, they know a lot about specific things, right? Of course. And as I got older, I realized that the advice that we're getting is usually based on our own lack of awareness. You wouldn't take advice financially from somebody who doesn't have much money, right? Like it wouldn't make any sense logically to do that. And I think a lot of us are taking advice from people who aren't chasing their dreams, who aren't focused on self-improvement. And once you connect that and say, wait, and this is a very important question, why? Why am I taking this advice? Oh, because I love this person. Okay, cool. Why else? What's the other proof that you're using that's convincing you to take this advice? Ask yourself why. And if you continue asking yourself that question, you'll get to the root of, oh, I don't know, because I don't want to let this person down. I don't want to create tension, whatever it might be.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, I think that's one important aspect. What advice would you give to young business people starting out on a new venture, a new business, a new purpose?
Yeah, I would say make sure you have your P's in the right order. So I know a lot of people who start a business or a venture because they want profit. And yes, money is required for a business to run. But I think a lot of people start a business based on profit and they try to convince themselves that they're passionate about it. When if you start a business based on what you're passionate about and you stay in the pool long enough to learn how to make it profitable, I think you'll be living a much, much, much more fulfilled, more aligned life. When I started this, I was not thinking about the money. I was thinking about the impact. The money is great and it's awesome, but the money goes back into the business so we can ultimately help more people. So yeah, I think a lot of people, they start something based on profit. They try to convince themselves that they're passionate about it. And I just think that's a recipe for long-term dissatisfaction.
Absolutely. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world at the moment, a lot of fear and anxiety. And now you've gone through that painful process, and there are at this moment lots of people out there who are contemplating this question: is it all worth it?
Mm.
Is life meaningful? Has life got a purpose? What message would you send out to that person having these thoughts?
Mm. I would say, and it's cliche, but you're going to get what you're looking for and you're going to get what you're focusing on. If you've convinced yourself that you don't have a passion, that you don't have a purpose, that life isn't about meaning, odds of you finding it are pretty slim because you're not looking for it. It might be right in front of your eyes, but you haven't primed your mind to find it. Where if you say, oh, I know my mission, my purpose, my passion, my reason, my why is out there, you're going to look at everything a little bit differently. It's almost like if you go into the pantry when it's dark and you're looking for food, there's a lot of different things you can look for. If you're looking for soup, you're looking for a can. So if you touch a can, you say, oh, that could be soup. But if you touch a box, you're probably saying, oh, that's not, maybe that's cereal. So whatever your intentions are going to dictate what you look for, what you see, and what you actually recognize. So I would say just start with the understanding that, you know what, if I believe a little bit more in the fact that there is a mission, that there is a purpose, that life is about meaning, those things will present themselves to me. They've always been there. They've always been there. Like if you go buy a yellow car right now, I guarantee you're going to see more yellow cars. They've always been there. Your subconscious mind was just not primed to see them. And I think success and meaning and fulfillment, relationships, I think everything is like that.
And life isn't just one straight line. It's a path full of curves and uphills and downhills. We go through ups and downs of life. We go through moments of sadness, of melancholy, and then we have moments of happiness. But our society is telling us, there's something wrong with you if you aren't always in a, quote, happy state.
Yeah. I can tell you it's tough because you see me podcasting and I love podcasting and I'm usually happy when I'm podcasting, but I have quote unquote my dream life where I get to do what I love every day. And I still have days I don't want to get out of bed. I still have days where I'm sad. I still have days where I don't want to do anything. This is the analogy I always use, Reno. The difference between happiness and fulfillment. If this podcast goes well, I will be happy. Regardless of how well this podcast goes, I am fulfilled in the process of doing it. That's the best analogy. It's the best analogy because it's not about the end result creates happiness. I think the process of doing something that you're meant to be doing that is within alignment with who you are, I think that is what fulfillment ultimately is. So look more for fulfillment than momentary pieces of happiness. I think that's a good little frame to look through.
Great. Now, how do people connect with you, Kevin? Just one last question. And
Sure. Yeah. Our podcast is Next Level University. We're on all the major podcast platforms. We do an episode every single day. So we're always there for our community, and we're also on YouTube. And then my handle on Instagram is at Never Quit Kid. And that is the best place to reach out to me. I try to send audios or video messages to everybody who follows me. And I am talking to people in my direct messages every day. So if you want to ask, you want to talk, you want to vent, please do not hesitate to reach out.
Kevin, it was really great talking to you.
Thank
And
you,
I
my
think you
friend.
have such an important message for people out there.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. It was wonderful. And I appreciate your time, and I appreciate what you're doing.